My nightmare mother-in-law just stabbed me yet is somehow blaming me for it. My husband is demanding that I forgive her. There is no way I'm forgiving that witch. My husband and I have been married for 4 years and have a 3-year-old son together. My mother-in-law hasn't liked me since I became a tattoo artist around 5 years ago and gave her son his first tattoo. I'm heavily inked and now my husband is too. His tattoos are a huge point of conflict between she and I. She takes him getting modifications as him, ruining the body she made for him, and has asked him on several occasions if he isn't happy with himself and goes on these weird woe is me rants. I guess all of the work I did to make you doesn't matter. You hate what I made. I'm the worst mom. How could you do this to me kind of stuff. She has always been nothing more than passive-aggressive, until today. We made a rare visit to mother and stepfather-in-law's house to let my son play at their jungle gym since he's been begging to go. My mother-in-law was surprisingly pleasant and ordered us all takeout. It was actually kind of nice. Granted, she was being her usual self, criticizing my tattoos every chance he got, blaming me for husband's tattoos, but in a very subtle manner which she did not think we picked up on. Either way, at one point stepfather-in-law pulled out his phone and asked, "So what do you think of this?" and showed me a really well done tattoo. I said it was gorgeous. He asked if I could do it for him, and I said no because it isn't in a style I'm mother-in-law with doing, but if he gave me time to practice I'd be more than happy to do it once I figure out how to get the shading right. My mother-in-law overheard and made a snide comment about me being a bad influence. I joked back, "Yeah, being a bad influence kind of comes with the territory, I guess. I stab people a lot for a living." I didn't realize what had happened for a moment, and according to my husband, my mother-in-law moved so fast that it even took him a second to catch on. We were outside. The beach had been fiddling around with the fire pit using a little hot dog roasting pig thing that came to a point. She whipped it towards me and jammed it into the upper part of my arm, managing to insert it deeply. I jumped up and started screaming. My husband was yelling. Our son started crying. Stepfather-in-law ushered mother-in-law into the house and kept yelling, "Sorry, oh my God, I'm so sorry, why would you do that? I'm so sorry, please don't call the police, hold on, I'm coming back, are you okay?" and other word vomit to defuse us. We packed my son into the car and mother-in-law didn't resurface. My husband went inside to confront her while I checked out my arm. It wasn't bad as I thought. It didn't pierce too far at all, about a pinky fingernail length worth, but it was bleeding. My husband apparently confronted mother and stepfather-in-law. Stepfather-in-law was apologetic and begged him not to call the cops. Husband asked mother-in-law why she did it and she apparently answered, "She said she stabs people for a living, so I was going to poke her and say, 'Now you see how it feels,' but I didn't know my own strength." Husband promised not to call the cops but said to leave him the F alone unless he contacts her. Sounds good, right? Nope. Less than an hour after this had happened, husband was on my butt about forgiving her. He now isn't speaking to me because I told him I actually do want to call the police, and he said if I did, he'd never forgive me. He actually threatened to grab the son and go to mother-in-law's house for tonight if I didn't call her to talk it out. She's texted me over 20 times telling me she didn't mean to but not actually apologizing. I don't know what to do. My nightmare mother-in-law just stabbed me yet is somehow blaming me for it. My husband is demanding that I forgive her. Things are so crazy right now. For starters, my son and I are at an urgent care clinic with my sister. We will be staying with her until husband finds a new rental. We are safe. So, my sister drove over immediately after I called her and told me to pack a couple bags and come on. This all went down within 15 minutes after my husband stormed upstairs telling me he would not speak to me. I started packing to leave with my sister and my husband noticed and started freaking out, crying and begging me not to go with her. My sister took my kid to the car so he didn't have to see my husband and I arguing, thank God, and I lost it. We both yelled, we both cried. My husband kept yelling that his mom texted him to say she's crying her eyes out and is suicidal because everyone will think she's an abuser when I tell the cops. He asked if I planned to call the cops and I answered yes. He asked me to come and talk to his mom, one more time, and hear her out before I called. I agreed because I was already feeling crappy. My mother-in-law came over and sat in the chair looking sheepish. The first thing out of her mouth was, "Is your son here?" I said no. I asked my sister to take him for the night. She sighed and actually pouted, then said, "You wanted to talk, so talk." My husband later admitted to me that he told his mother I realized I was overreacting and that I would apologize. Nope. Him saying that emboldened her. Basically, I called her out and said there was no way it was an accident. She said she just didn't realize how strong she is since she expects herself to be weak due to being sick. I got mad and raised my voice. She started trying to defuse. It was working honestly. I was doubting myself. Then she dropped a bomb I didn't expect. "You're just so hard to get along with. I just didn't expect you to be the one my son ended up with." I'm glad he did, but I expected someone more biblical. "I love you to bits though." My husband, to my surprise, jumped up and yelled, "What the F does that mean, Mom?" She looked startled then scolded him like a child. It was so unexpected that I just sat back. She kept talking and talking, then said something about disciplining me like a child, and it didn't even go in that deep. This is so ignorant. If it had gone deeper I'd understand. My husband, for once in our marriage, stood up to her. He blatantly asked, "Did you do this on purpose?" At first she said no, then relented. "I didn't know it'd actually go in, I didn't know it'd draw blood." My husband told her to get out. All of this in less than 15 minutes. He told her to never call him again and that we'd be moving. She started yelling and he shoved her out the door and slammed it in her face. I told him that if he was serious about moving, good, but I'm not staying until we find a place and neither is our son. I also demanded therapy and to never see his mom again. He agreed. My sister picked us up, and our son crashed on her couch. Sister looked at my arm and said we needed to go to urgent care now, so here we are. They said it needs 2 stitches, so we're waiting on that, and I'm going to receive a tetanus booster and some other shot that I'm missing. We spoke to the clinic cop and he said that it was probably an accident and basically brushed us off, so we're filing a police report tomorrow. My nightmare mother-in-law just stabbed me yet is somehow blaming me for it. My husband is demanding that I forgive her. It just keeps getting worse. My husband called me around 5 this morning and informed me that after some thought, he does not want to move houses. An important thing to note is that the mother owns the house we live in, we rent from her. Either way, he said that mother-in-law came over and let herself into the house while I was in urgent care. They talked for a while and that she's genuinely sorry and offered to let us keep the house for free if we maintain the yard better and let this go. I'm not proud of myself, but I lost it. I called him out on never supporting me on anything ever with his mom and he just kept making excuses for her past behaviors. This woman slapped our child hard enough it left a mark when he was less than 18 months old for knocking a cup over onto her, and he excused it as, "She did it with us too, she just parents that way and views him as her own. She loves him so much and just jumped the gun." This whole ordeal makes me realize just how broken our marriage is. Her thinking my son is hers is a huge issue, not an excuse for laying hands on him. I feel like a crap mom. I've allowed her to do so much. She never laid a hand on him after that, but looking back, she said some awful stuff to my baby. She called him the R-word when he was 2 because he spilled a plate of pasta and cried over it. That's just one example. I told my husband he can stay there and I'll move in with my sister. He demanded that our son come back to live with him, but I refused. He's welcome to see him, but he cannot take him anywhere because our son will not be seeing mother-in-law. My husband asked if our son could ever see mother-in-law again and I said no, and as I started explaining that she'd also been hurting him, husband just kept yelling, "But she's my mom and his grandma, so she's going to see him one way or another, over and over again." He hung up on me when I said, "Not after I file a police report. I'm not doing this," and then he sent me some texts about how I never cared about him and how his mom is right because if I loved him I wouldn't do this to him. My mother-in-law has also texted me. She's apparently so sick and upset that she can't sleep. I haven't responded, but since the last post I've received 4. The last one includes a fun note about how even though I hate her I cannot take my son from her and if I try she'll fight back. I screenshotted it all and am going to hand it over to the police. In one she admits that she was only joking around when she poked me and claimed that it only went through because my tattoos weakened my skin. Which is bullcrap. Edit, I am filing for divorce. My husband and mother-in-law both sent me over a dozen texts apiece. My husband said he wants a divorce because I can't possibly love him if I hate his family this much, so I agreed. He backpedaled pretty hard and admitted he was trying to manipulate me, but screw that. Mother-in-law still hasn't actually apologized. Also, we filed a police report. The officer was sympathetic and agreed it's assault but said not to expect too much because it likely won't go very far. They went out and spoke to her. I have no clue what she said. They didn't arrest her, just warned her to expect a court date and to leave me alone. She immediately texted me to stop and leave her alone. I didn't respond. I've had doubts about the police report, but I'm not going back on it. I'm filing for emergency custody until this is sorted due to yesterday evening. Our son did not go to daycare yesterday. My aunt came down and watched him while sister and I handled everything because I didn't feel comfortable since the daycare can't say no to the child's father. I texted literally anyone I could think of who I trusted with my baby to come watch him. He stayed at my sister's apartment. At 5:45, our son's daycare teacher called me in a panic, asking if I dropped him off because my son wasn't there to be picked up. I'd forgotten to call her to tell her we wouldn't be coming today, so I apologized and explained my son wouldn't be coming in for a little while. She said his dad was outside to get him and asked if everything was okay. I said no and to tell my husband that our son isn't going back to daycare. She hung up. I got a text from my husband asking where I am and when he can pick up our son. I said he's welcome to come see him, but he can't take him to see mother-in-law. He didn't respond. Lastly, I am going to my aunt's house later this week. She has a guest room and is going to watch our son every day and let me take her car to the shop for work. Some background: mother-in-law used to love me. She didn't like my tattoos, but I didn't have a lot at the time, so she just brushed it off aside from some passive-aggressive comments. We moved in with mother and stepfather-in-law while I was pregnant under the impression that we would buy the house once theirs was done being built. She promised to let us buy it. Mother-in-law asked that I take my piercings out. We fought about it, but I relented because it was supposed to be a less than 6-month thing. They moved like 4 months later. I could still put in 2 of my piercings. She noticed and threw a hissy fit over my basic earring holes and said part of the lease is that they cannot be in. Yep, we went from buying to renting from them. My husband didn't even tell me. Apparently, our rent was cheaper than the note would have been, so he agreed. This became a pattern. I tell mother-in-law no, our son can't have something, and she'd ask my husband, who'd say, "Sure, mommy. Anything for you. You're the best mommy ever." So for the first 1.5 years, our son was basically being parented by mother-in-law behind my back, and I didn't even know. She was our daycare because we both worked 9 to 5 basically on most days, until she slapped my son so hard. It left an actual handprint which welted. For 4 months, she didn't see him, then my husband started sneaking him over while I wasn't home. Then I'd come home and they'd be gone to get ice cream or to the park. I caught him finally when our son started talking and said he was going to Nana's. My mom doesn't live here, so it clicked. I was weak, so I caved and started going too. That's when the pasta incident happened, along with several other things. We started going less and less. I had been tattooing at that point for a bit and had amassed a lot of pieces. Mother-in-law had only seen me briefly in long sleeves and long pants, so she hadn't noticed, but when she saw them, she claimed I was violating the rental agreement and tried to throw me out and keep our son there with my husband. My husband offered me an apartment and said he'd pay for it from the money he was getting from mother-in-law. I refused and said if I left, our son was coming. Mother-in-law relented. She got really passive-aggressive when I started inking her son and was outright abusive to him. She started making comments about, "Well, I just expect your son to show up one day with a tattoo. I dare you to touch him with that thing. If he ever gets one, I'll beat the devil out of you, and, our son, you love yourself, so don't you get tattoos and holes like them." Our son actually said he didn't like mine at one point, but later admitted he did, but Nana said it was bad when he told her about some of them. My husband actually supported me then and told her to F off. We rarely saw her for a while. She bought this stupid massive jungle gym for our son for his birthday recently and said it had to be set up at her house. Our son begged and begged to use it, so we let him, and she stabbed me. My life has been turned upside down. I'm terrified and don't know what to do. I've never even been in a courtroom. I've only filed a police report once in my life other than this. I am filing for divorce not because I want to, but because I realized I'm being abused and this isn't okay.